She contacted the authorities about my wife loading ammunition. This unhinged HOA member, a real Karen, actually called 911 because Sophia was simply inserting bullets into her rifle by our private lake. Karen was having a complete meltdown, shrieking about lethal weapons terrorizing innocent families, all while my wife calmly engaged in target shooting practice on our own property. When the police showed up for the second time, Karen was absolutely convinced this scenario would culminate with my wife being placed in handcuffs, but after they ran a check on Sophia's background, something occurred that caused Karen to freeze solid, her mouth agape in utter disbelief. She had clearly underestimated who she was dealing with. Echo Stories viewers, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Allow me to set the scene for you. Emerald Lake is one of those affluent neighborhoods where residents actually adhere to HOA regulations, and you won't find anyone leaving their trash cans out past collection day. My wife, Sophia, and I had built our own little piece of paradise here, featuring a private stretch of lakefront perfect for Sophia to pursue her passion for hunting and target practice. It was entirely legal, completely safe, and marked with a clear sign indicating private property firearm. Training in progress. For anyone with a modicum of sense to see, Sophia possesses an incredible calmness, as serene as the lake itself on a windless morning. Yet with firearms, she handles them with a level of meticulous precision that suggests prior professional experience. She has a habit of cleaning her rifle with an attention to detail that frankly borders on obsessive. But safety first, right? Everything in our peaceful corner of paradise remained tranquil until Hurricane Vivian Montgomery made her arrival. Now, let me paint you a picture of Vivian Montgomery. Imagine every negative stereotype of a Karen from the internet rolled into a single individual. She sported a blunt blonde bob haircut that practically screamed, "I demand to speak to your manager." Her voice carried like a theatrical performance, even when merely asking for directions, and she harbored this profound complex about being the community's self-anointed leader, despite no one actually appointing her to the role. Mrs. Patricia Wells, our 70-year-old HOA secretary, a woman who had been dealing with troublesome residents for a quarter-century, was tending to her immaculate garden when she spotted Vivian storming past in one of her characteristic fits of pique. "Oh, wonderful! Another drama queen," Mrs. Patricia muttered to herself, adjusting her reading glasses. "This promises to be entertaining." And believe me, Patricia Wells has an innate ability to recognize a troublemaker from a mile away. She possesses a special knack for detecting falsehoods. From 500 yards, likely a skill honed during her years as a paralegal before retiring. Here's where the situation became truly intriguing. Vivian wasn't just your average nosy neighbor. She was engaged in a much more elaborate scheme. You see, this woman had recently acquired 3 properties in our community since January, with a grand plan to renovate and resell them for substantial profits. She needed to cultivate an image of a luxurious, secure haven to justify inflating prices by 40%. And Sophia's perfectly legal firearm activities were, apparently, a nightmare for her marketing strategy. Vivian had already invested over $200,000 of her own funds into these properties, banking on selling them as premium, family-friendly luxury residences to young professionals relocating from the city. Her promotional materials featured phrases like gunfire-free, tranquil community, and safe haven for children. Sophia's target practice, however lawful and responsible, was undermining that painstakingly crafted narrative. Every photograph Vivian took was intended to document what she would later claim were declining neighborhood safety standards, used to back out of deals or demand lower purchase prices from her contractors. So what course of action did our aspiring real estate mogul pursue? She initiated intelligence-gathering operations, as if she were working for the CIA, meticulously noting the precise times Sophia practiced, capturing photos from various angles with a rather unsettling telephoto lens, and compiling what she termed incident documentation, with details so dramatically exaggerated they would make a soap opera writer blush. The defining moment that truly ignited the conflict occurred on a Tuesday afternoon. Sophia was by the lake, loading ammunition, one round at a time with the kind of mechanical precision that would impress a Swiss watchmaker. Then, Vivian appeared like some sort of final boss villain, launching into a theatrical performance where she dramatically gasped for air covering her nose and coughing as though being attacked by a noxious gas. I observed the entire spectacle from our kitchen window. Sophia simply paused what she was doing, gave Vivian a look colder than an Arctic winter, then calmly resumed her work with an intimidating level of composure that honestly sent shivers down my spine. Meanwhile, Mrs. Patricia was pretending to prune her roses, but her eyes were fixed on the unfolding drama. That girl handles firearms like a professional, she thought to herself. And that other one, pure theater. The whole scene felt surreal. Here was my wife, minding her own business on her own property, adhering to every safety protocol imaginable, and this woman was behaving as if Sophia had declared war on the entire neighborhood. Vivian stood there, huffing and puffing like the big bad wolf, capturing photos and videos as if documenting evidence for the International Criminal Court, while Sophia maintained a level of calm that was honestly more unsettling than if she had become angry. You know the saying, still waters run deep? Well, my wife is like the deepest part of the ocean, quiet, mysterious, and you absolutely do not want to test what lies beneath that surface. I could see in Vivian's eyes that she was already plotting her next move, likely believing she had amassed sufficient evidence to bring down public enemy number one. The confrontation concluded with Vivian storming off, clutching her phone filled with evidence as if carrying nuclear launch codes, making a dramatic declaration. I'll show you who's really in charge around here. Mrs. Patricia merely chuckled from her garden. Good luck with that one, honey. But what I failed to grasp at the time was that this was not just a random neighbor dispute. Vivian had transformed this into a personal crusade, and she was only just beginning. The woman had financial resources, strong motivation, and apparently far too much free time. I remember thinking to myself, this lady has no idea what she's getting herself into. But honestly, neither did I. However, what truly resonated with me about that initial encounter was Sophia's reaction, or rather, her complete lack thereof. Most people would have become defensive, perhaps shouted back, or at least acknowledged the irrational woman having a breakdown 50 feet away. Not Sophia. She simply continued her task with an unwavering focus that made me wonder, not for the first time, exactly what my wife had done before we met. I knew she had some kind of government background, but the way she handled pressure was unlike anything I had ever observed from a civilian. The woman could probably defuse a bomb while someone was screaming in her ear, but Vivian truly did not comprehend who she was dealing with, did she? Tell me in the comments, have you ever encountered someone who appeared ordinary but was concealing something significant? So, Vivian didn't just call 911. Oh no, that would have been too straightforward for our aspiring drama queen. This woman launched a full-blown smear campaign with the hashtag #ToDangerousNeighbor, posting theatrical selfies, accompanied by captions like "Living in Fear" and "Armed Woman Terrorizes Peaceful Community." She even established one of those online fundraising pages to hire security to protect the neighborhood from my wife, because apparently a woman legally practicing marksmanship on her own property is equivalent to harboring a terrorist cell. The fundraising page was titled Emergency Community Protection Fund, with a goal of $5,000 for a professional security, assessment, and ongoing protection services. After 3 days, she had raised precisely $47 from 2 donors, likely her own relatives. The comment section was brutal, with neighbors publicly criticizing her for manufacturing drama and wasting everyone's time with conspiracy theories. When 2 police officers finally arrived, practically bouncing on her toes with excitement. I swear this woman missed her true calling as a stage actress, because her performance was absolutely Oscar-worthy. "Officers, thank God you're here!" Vivian practically shrieked, gesturing wildly toward our property as if directing air traffic. She was loading real bullets, actual ammunition, right there where innocent children might see. Now, I should point out that our practice area is actually 200 yards from the nearest playground, and entirely on private property, but facts have never been Vivian's strong suit. She was waving her phone around, displaying her evidence, photos and videos, she had taken while trespassing on the edge of our property line, which was quite ironic considering she was complaining about feeling unsafe. The officers stood there maintaining professional composure while this woman spun a narrative that would make Stephen King proud of the dramatic tension. Here's where things became truly interesting. Instead of panicking or getting defensive, as most people would when police officers show up at their door, Sophia had apparently anticipated this exact scenario. She appeared with a perfectly organized folder of documents, permits, licenses, safety certifications, property surveys, handed over with the kind of clinical precision that made you wonder if she had dealt with law enforcement inquiries before. Every response she provided was measured, professional, economical with words, yet devastatingly effective. She wasn't attempting to charm them or provide extensive explanations. She was simply presenting facts with the quiet confidence of someone who knew they were entirely in the right. The officers began examining Sophia's gun handling, techniques and safety protocols, and I noticed one of them observing her more closely than usual. There was a moment of recognition in his eyes, as if he were witnessing something that didn't quite fit the typical civilian profile. "Ma'am, your procedures are exceptionally thorough," he commented, studying her movements as she demonstrated proper storage and handling. "This level of training isn't typical civilian instruction." I could almost see the wheels turning in his head, but Sophia simply nodded politely without elaborating, which honestly made the whole situation even more intriguing. The officer continued to study Sophia as if trying to solve a puzzle. That didn't quite fit. He posed a few more questions about her training background, where she had acquired these safety protocols, and how long she had been practicing marksmanship with such precision. Each answer Sophia provided was technically complete, but revealed absolutely nothing about her actual experience level or background. Most civilians I encounter have learned from basic safety courses or online tutorials, he mentioned casually, clearly probing for more information. Your knowledge base seems considerably more comprehensive than typical recreational training. Sophia merely smiled politely and thanked him for the compliment, which only intensified his curiosity about the kind of extensive training that produces such a level of composure and technical expertise. Meanwhile, Vivian stood there, tapping her foot impatiently, likely wondering why they weren't immediately arresting my wife for the supposed crime of owning firearms, while being female. Then came the moment that made my jaw drop. After a brief, tense silence during which the officer studied Sophia intently, his entire demeanor shifted. "Ma'am, your safety protocols exceed our department standards," he stated with genuine respect. "Have you considered volunteering for our community firearms education program?" The expression on Vivian's face, oh man, I truly wish I had captured that on camera. Her expression morphed from confident to utterly confused, then to absolutely furious, all within about 3 seconds. But she's dangerous," Vivian sputtered like a broken engine. "Aren't you going to do something?" The officer turned to her, with that professional patience that police officers must acquire during training. "Ma'am, filing false reports is a misdemeanor. I suggest you think carefully before making future calls." I was watching this entire scene unfold from our front porch, trying desperately not to burst out, laughing as Vivian's elaborate master plan completely imploded. She had anticipated the police arriving to arrest my wife, perhaps confiscate our legally owned firearms, and most certainly validate her concerns about our dangerous neighbor. Instead, they were practically recruiting Sophia for community service and warning Vivian about wasting police resources. The woman was left standing there, sputtering like a malfunctioning engine, while Mrs. Patricia observed the entire situation from her window, with obvious satisfaction. "Round one goes to the girl with the gun," Patricia murmured to herself, likely already mentally composing the report she would file regarding this incident. But here's what truly stood out to me about the entire encounter. The way the officers treated Sophia wasn't merely professional courtesy. There was something more there, a level of respect that seemed to extend beyond simply appreciating proper safety procedures. They kept looking at her as if they were trying to place her, as if she reminded them of someone or something they couldn't quite identify. Sophia, for her part, remained completely composed throughout the entire interaction, answering their questions, with just enough information to satisfy their inquiry without volunteering anything extra. It was like observing a master class in controlled communication. The officers departed with handshakes and business cards, suggesting Sophia contact them about that community education program, while Vivian stood there, looking like someone had just stolen her birthday cake. I remember thinking at the time that this was probably the end of it. Surely even someone as persistent as Vivian would back down after having the police essentially tell her she was in the wrong. But as I watched her face cycle through emotions, finally settling on a determined grimace that suggested she was just getting started, I realized this was far from over. The woman had invested too much pride, and likely too much money, in her campaign, against Sophia to simply walk away. Later, Mrs. Patricia informed me that she had spent the remainder of that evening sitting by her window, watching Vivian pace around her property while talking animatedly on her phone. "That woman's not finished," Patricia warned me the next morning. "She's the type who doubles down when she should be folding. Your wife better be prepared for round 2. And you know what? Patricia was absolutely correct. Vivian was already formulating her next move, likely researching exactly how to transform this setback into what she envisioned as ultimate victory. Why did the police show such respect for Sophia? Hey, Echo Stories viewers, comment below. And guess who Sophia really is that even the cops took notice? Now, Vivian pivoted to what she probably believed was professional warfare. Instead of hiring an expensive private investigator, as one might see in the movies, this woman dedicated her entire weekend to conducting online background searches, filing public records requests, and even trying those dubious people search websites that promise to reveal your neighbor's darkest secrets for $19.99. By Sunday night, Vivian had spent nearly $500 on various background check services, premium database access, and even paid for some advanced government employee verification service that turned out to be a complete scam. Her credit card statement for that month must have looked like she was operating her own private investigation agency. All that money. And the most damning thing she supposedly uncovered was that Sophia had worked for classified government departments, which could mean anything from the Department of Agriculture to the Pentagon. Meanwhile, she was preparing for the HOA meeting as if planning a corporate takeover, complete with what I can only describe as a presentation worthy of a Fortune 500 boardroom. The woman had charts, graphs, and enough color-coded documentation to make a project manager weep with joy. Here's what Vivian managed to discover through her amateur detective work. Sophia had employment gaps in her resume, some government paperwork references that were frustratingly vague, and specialized certifications where the details were conveniently redacted or classified. To most rational individuals, this might suggest someone who worked in a sensitive government position, perhaps State Department, perhaps a defense contractor. Nothing too unusual for the Washington, D.C. area. But to Vivian, this was smoking gun evidence of a suspicious background that validated every paranoid theory she had concocted. The woman could find conspiracy theories in a grocery receipt if she tried hard enough. Sophia and I were fully aware that Vivian had been digging into our affairs. It was rather difficult to miss when someone was taking photos of your house at different times of the day and interrogating the mailman about our delivery patterns. But instead of becoming defensive or hiring lawyers, Sophia actually seemed amused by the whole situation. "Let her look," she told me one evening, while cleaning her rifle with that same methodical precision. She might learn something interesting. There was something in the way she said it that made me think. My wife knew exactly how this was going to unfold, which honestly should have been my first clue, that Sophia was playing chess while Vivian was still stuck on checkers. The HOA meeting took place at the community center, and Vivian had booked the main conference room as if hosting a shareholders summit. She had a professional slideshow featuring charts about property values, crime statistics pulled from God knows where, and photos of Sophia that were clearly taken without permission from various angles around our property. The presentation title, "Protecting Our Investment, the Hidden Threat Among Us," was displayed in bold letters that would make a conspiracy theorist proud. Mrs. Patricia Wells was seated in the front row, reviewing what appeared to be a thick folder of documents with the kind of focused attention that usually spells trouble for someone. What the audience didn't know was that Mrs. Patricia had spent the past week conducting her own investigation, not into Sophia, but into Vivian's activities and financial dealings. Utilizing her paralegal skills and HOA secretary access, she traced Vivian's property purchases, reviewed complaint patterns, and even contacted previous neighborhoods where Vivian had resided. The pattern was consistently the same. Buy properties, manufacture complaints about existing residents to justify safety concerns, then market the improved properties as premium, problem-free communities. Patricia possessed documentation of Vivian, attempting this exact strategy in 2 other developments, including one where she had successfully orchestrated the departure of a family with teenagers she had labeled as disruptive influences. Tonight's folder contained property records, complaint histories, and even screenshots of Vivian's previous real estate. Marketing materials that conclusively proved this was a calculated business strategy, not genuine community concern. Vivian delivered her presentation with the fervor of a TED Talk speaker exposing corporate corruption. She had slides detailing gun violence statistics, property value impacts, and an entire section dedicated to what she termed residents with questionable backgrounds. The woman was practically vibrating with excitement as she presented her evidence. Those photos of Sophia, charts allegedly showing decreased property values in neighborhoods with firearm incidents, and a conclusion that essentially demanded immediate action to protect the community from this hidden threat among us. She was clearly anticipating standing ovations and immediate vindication for all her hard work. Sophia attended the meeting wearing a simple but elegant dress, sitting quietly in the back with her hands folded, her face completely unreadable. She didn't react to the accusations, didn't fidget when Vivian displayed her photos, didn't even raise an eyebrow when Vivian suggested that certain residents should be required to undergo additional background checks. It was like watching someone patiently waiting for a child to finish throwing a tantrum. And honestly, it made Vivian's theatrical presentation look even more ludicrous by comparison. The contrast between Vivian's dramatics and Sophia's composed silence was so stark that some neighbors were beginning to appear uncomfortable. When called upon to respond, Sophia stood calmly and spoke with a quiet authority that immediately commanded attention. "I have lived here for 2 years without incident," she stated, her voice carrying clearly through the room, without any need for dramatic projection. "I follow all laws and regulations regarding firearm ownership and use. I am curious what specific evidence Ms. Montgomery has of any actual wrongdoing on my part." It was a simple question, but it cut directly to the core of Vivian's entire argument. Lots of innuendo and suspicion, but zero evidence of any actual problems. Vivian fumbled through her response, falling back on vague accusations about suspicious backgrounds and government connections that sounded increasingly paranoid when articulated aloud. That's when Mrs. Patricia Wells cleared her throat and unleashed what I can only describe as a tactical nuclear bomb. "Speaking of backgrounds," she said in that crisp, no-nonsense voice that had made grown men cry in previous HOA meetings, "I've been reviewing recent property acquisitions in our community. Miss Montgomery, you've purchased 3 homes since January, all scheduled for immediate renovation and resale. Interesting timing with your sudden concerns about community, safety, and property values." The room fell completely silent. You could have heard a pin drop as neighbors began connecting the dots between Vivian's financial interests and her campaign against Sophia. Suddenly, all those passionate speeches about protecting our children and maintaining community standards looked a lot more like a calculated business strategy designed to eliminate anything that might interfere with Vivian's profit margins. Mrs. Patricia continued reviewing her documentation with the casual efficiency of someone who had been navigating before Vivian was born. While Vivian's face cycled through several interesting shades of red, the meeting concluded without any action taken against Sophia. But Vivian was far from defeated. If anything, being publicly exposed for her financial motivations seemed to have made her more determined, rather than embarrassed. "Fine," she announced to anyone within earshot as people exited the community center. "If the HOA won't protect us, I'll find people who will." Mrs. Patricia packed up her documents with obvious satisfaction, noting quietly to herself, "That woman has no idea who she's dealing with. But she's about to find out." I drove home that night, thinking perhaps this entire ordeal was finally over. Surely, even someone as stubborn as Vivian would concede after being exposed like that. But as we were pulling into our driveway, I noticed lights on in Vivian's house and her silhouette, pacing back and forth past the windows while gesturing animatedly at what was probably her phone. Sophia noticed it too and simply shook her head with what I swear was amusement. "She's not done yet," my wife observed, and something in her tone suggested she was not only unsurprised by this development, but perhaps even counting on it. What was Vivian about to discover about Sophie's past? Comment now. How serious do you think the secret Sophia's hiding could be? Vivian didn't just escalate. She went completely nuclear. This woman filed complaints with every government agency she could conceive of. The fire department about hazardous material storage, from gun cleaning supplies, animal control about gunshots disturbing local wildlife, environmental services about noise pollution, and she even attempted to contact the FBI tip line about what she termed a suspicious federal employee conducting unauthorized activities in a residential area. I began to wonder if there was some kind of government agency complaint bingo card she was trying to complete, because this level of bureaucratic harassment was honestly impressive in its thoroughness. But here's where Vivian thought she had struck gold. Through her weekend warrior internet detective work and public record searches, she pieced together that Sophia possessed a military service number and some kind of federal employment history. The details were frustratingly vague. Most of the significant information was redacted or classified, but it was enough to fuel her paranoid imagination. "I knew she was hiding something," Vivian practically shouted to anyone who would listen, waving printouts around as if she had just cracked the Pentagon Papers. She had convinced herself that she had uncovered evidence of some kind of dangerous government operative living undercover in suburbia, which honestly sounded like the plot of a mediocre action movie. The strategic escalation continued with Vivian organizing what she called a community safety rally at the local park. She created an event page online, designed professionally printed banners, with slogans like "Protect Our Families" from hidden threats, and even contacted the local blogger who covered neighborhood news, promising an explosive investigation into government cover-ups in residential areas. The woman had transformed from an annoying neighbor into a full-time conspiracy theorist, and she was actively recruiting others to join her cause. Observing her efforts, I had to admit, there was something almost admirable about her dedication, even if it was entirely misguided. Now, here's where my wife demonstrated just how strategically brilliant she truly is. Instead of becoming defensive or attempting to conceal herself from Vivian's investigation, Sophia made a calculated decision to let Vivian discover just enough truth to completely expose herself. "If she wants to know who I am," Sophia told me one evening while we were sitting by the lake, "she should be careful what she wishes for." There was something in her voice, not threatening, but definitely loaded with implications, that made me think this chess game was about to reach its end game. My wife had been playing the long game this entire time, and I was only just beginning to realize how completely outmatched Vivian truly was. Sophia began deliberately leaving certain non-sensitive documents visible during her morning coffee routine when she knew Vivian was conducting her surveillance operations. Nothing classified or dangerous, just enough military training certificates and service awards to confirm Vivian's suspicions without revealing the full scope of what she was dealing with. It was like watching someone set a trap for a particularly aggressive mouse, except the mouse believed it was hunting a cat. Sophia had even started timing her rifle cleaning sessions for when Vivian was most likely to be watching, performing each step with the kind of professional precision that probably had Vivian taking notes about. Advanced tactical training. Armed with her evidence, Vivian entered full conspiracy theorist mode. She began posting online about exposed government agent living among us, and contacted every possible authority with dramatic claims about suspicious federal activities in residential areas. She was convinced herself that she was about to blow the lid off, some kind of deep state operation, and she wanted the entire world to witness her moment of triumph. The rally she organized attracted a decent crowd, some curious neighbors, a few people who apparently had nothing better to do on a Saturday afternoon, and that local blogger with his camera, ready to document what Vivian promised would be a community-changing revelation. The setup was perfect. Vivian stood behind a microphone she had rented for the occasion. Professional banners hung in the background, a crowd of neighbors with their phones out, and that blogger live streaming the entire event. What I later discovered was that Vivian had spent over $800 on this rally, microphone rental, professional banner printing, and even hired some college kid to design her graphics and manage the live stream setup. She had purchased a portable stage platform, folding chairs, and even arranged for coffee and donuts to attract a larger crowd. The woman was hemorrhaging money on her anti-Sophia campaign, treating it like a political election, where she was running against my wife for mayor of the neighborhood. Every dollar spent was another nail in the coffin of her real estate profits. She was presenting her investigation findings as if she were exposing Watergate, complete with blown-up photos and documents she had printed from her internet research. "This woman has top-secret government training," she announced dramatically, gesturing toward our house as if pointing out a terrorist cell. "She's more dangerous than we ever imagined. The authorities have been covering up her true identity." That's when Sophia made her appearance. She didn't storm over angrily or attempt to disrupt the rally. She simply walked calmly across the park, wearing a simple white dress and carrying that same small folder she had prepared for the police visit. The crowd parted as she approached, and you could feel the tension escalating as everyone realized they were about to witness a direct confrontation between the accuser and the accused. Vivian was practically vibrating with excitement, convinced that this public forum would finally compel Sophia to reveal whatever she had been concealing. "Ms. Montgomery," Sophia said calmly, her voice carrying clearly without any need for a microphone. "You've spent considerable resources investigating me. Are you certain you want this information to become public? Because once it's revealed, there's no going back." It wasn't a threat. There was no menace in her voice, but there was something in the way she said it that caused the crowd to fall silent. Even the blogger momentarily stopped narrating his live stream, sensing that something significant was about to occur. But Vivian, riding high on her anticipated moment of public vindication, interpreted Sophia's warning as confirmation that she had been correct all along. "She's threatening me now," Vivian announced to the crowd and the camera, her voice reaching a pitch that likely had dogs howling 3 neighborhoods over. "This proves my point. What kind of government training teaches you to intimidate civilians? What are you hiding? What makes you so dangerous that you think you can silence anyone who questions you?" The crowd murmured uncertainly, some nodding along with Vivian's logic, while others appeared uncomfortable with the escalating drama. Sophia simply stood there with that unshakable calm that was honestly more unsettling than if she had become angry. "I'm not hiding anything, Ms. Montgomery," she said quietly. "I simply think you should be prepared for the consequences of getting exactly what you are asking for." Then she turned and walked away, leaving Vivian practically glowing with triumph and the crowd buzzing with speculation about what had just transpired. That blogger was probably already composing his headline about mysterious government agents and neighborhood conspiracies. I was watching this entire spectacle from our front porch, and I have to admit I was starting to feel nervous. Not about Sophia, I trust my wife completely, but about what Vivian might do next. The woman had clearly surpassed the point of rational thinking, and she had public attention and media coverage for her crusade. She had convinced herself that she was some kind of investigative hero about to expose a massive conspiracy, and people in that mindset can be dangerously unpredictable. But looking at Sophia as she walked calmly back to our house, I got the distinct feeling that everything was unfolding exactly according to whatever plan she had been formulating this whole time. That evening, I could see lights burning late in Vivian's house and her shadow moving around frantically, likely preparing for what she believed would be her final assault on our household. "Tomorrow," she kept saying to anyone who would listen, "tomorrow everyone will see the truth." And honestly, for the first time in this whole crazy saga, I thought she might actually be right about that. Just not in the way she was expecting. Will the truth about Sophia completely destroy Vivian's plans? Don't miss what happens next on Echo Stories, and comment below. What do you think is about to happen to Vivian? Multiple police cars arrived at the rally. And I mean multiple. More than you would ever expect for a neighborhood dispute. A large crowd had gathered around Vivian's makeshift stage, neighbors with their phones, recording every angle. That local blogger live streaming to what was probably dozens of viewers, and Vivian herself standing behind her rented microphone as if about to deliver the speech that would cement her legacy as a local hero. It was the perfect setting for what I now realize was always going to be the most incredible plot twist in HOA drama history. Though none of us had any idea at the time, Vivian greeted the arriving officers as if they were her personal cavalry coming to rescue her. Finally, she practically shrieked into the microphone, causing feedback that made everyone wince. "Officers, thank you for responding to our community's call for help. That woman," and she pointed dramatically towards Sophia, as if identifying a wanted fugitive, "has been terrorizing us with her weapons and suspicious government background. Today, we demand answers." The crowd possessed that uncomfortable energy you feel when public drama reaches a critical tipping point. Some people were nodding along with Vivian's narrative. Others were starting to look like they wished they were anywhere else. But everyone's phone was out because they sensed something significant was about to happen. Sophia stood calmly beside me, wearing that same simple white dress she had chosen for the rally, looking like the only person in this entire chaotic scene who was completely unaffected by the drama swirling around her. When the lead officer approached us, she simply said, "Officers, I believe there may be some confusion about my service record." Her voice was steady, professional, and possessed that quiet authority that automatically commanded everyone's attention. Meanwhile, Vivian was still working the crowd like a political candidate. Building up to what she clearly expected would be her moment of ultimate vindication. The lead officer ran Sophia's information through the patrol car computer, and I could see him waiting for the system to process. Whatever extensive background check was underway. When basic searches revealed military service records, he radioed back to the station to confirm details through appropriate channels. Because apparently, my wife's information required some kind of higher-level verification. I could hear fragments of the radio conversation. Something about clearance verification and metal citations requiring command authorization. The officer was clearly accessing databases that were not available through standard patrol car systems. Whatever information was being returned was significant enough that they needed supervisor approval just to discuss it publicly. That's when I realized Sophia wasn't just any veteran. She was someone whose service record necessitated special handling. The database check was taking longer than usual, and you could feel the tension building as everyone waited to see what kind of information would come back on the mysterious woman who had been the source of all this neighborhood drama. Vivian's confidence was absolutely peaking at this moment. "See," she announced to the crowd in that blogger's camera, her voice reaching frequencies that were probably affecting wildlife in the area. "Even the police computer knows she's dangerous. Check her classified background. She's been hiding government secrets right here in our neighborhood." What kind of training makes someone think they can intimidate honest citizens who are just trying to protect their families? The crowd was murmuring uncertainly, caught between Vivian's passionate accusations and their own discomfort with how far this whole situation had escalated. That's when everything changed. The officer's expression shifted as information came back through his radio. You could actually see the moment when professional recognition dawned on his face. He walked directly towards Sophia, stopped exactly 3 feet away, and the entire crowd went silent, as if someone had just muted the entire world. Even the blogger stopped narrating his live stream, sensing that whatever was about to happen would be significant enough to speak for itself. Then the officer stood at attention and rendered a perfect military salute. "Captain Sophia Martinez, United States Marine Corps, retired. Purple Heart recipient. 2 combat deployments. Thank you for your service to our country, ma'am." The words hung in the air as if echoing off invisible walls. And I swear you could have heard a pin drop in that crowd. Vivian's brain had apparently ceased processing information entirely. Her mouth was hanging open like a broken drawbridge. Her eyes were bulging cartoonishly, and her face was cycling through confusion, realization, and absolute horror. As the word "captain" reverberated inside her skull, the crowd erupted. There was a collective gasp that sounded like air being sucked out of the entire park, followed by applause that grew from a whisper to thunder as people grasped what they were witnessing. "Oh my God," murmurs rippled through the gathering. Phones were frantically refocusing to capture Vivian's frozen expression, and that blogger's live stream was probably exploding with comments as viewers realized they were watching someone's world completely implode in real time. Some of the older men in the crowd, likely veterans themselves, started saluting as well, and suddenly, this ridiculous neighborhood drama had transformed into an impromptu ceremony honoring a decorated war hero. The officer continued, and his words struck like bombs, demolishing Vivian's conspiracy theories. Ma'am, as a decorated Marine officer with a distinguished Service Cross and a Purple Heart, you have our complete respect and gratitude. Miss Montgomery, he said, turning toward Vivian, who was still frozen as if her operating system had crashed. Filing false reports against a combat veteran constitutes federal harassment of a service member, which carries serious legal implications under federal law. A second officer stepped forward and added, Captain, on behalf of the department, we apologize for any inconvenience. Your service record speaks for itself. A wave of community revelations spread through the crowd like wildfire. Neighbors were looking at Sophia with a mixture of awe, respect, and probably guilt for not recognizing who she was before. The American flag hanging in the background of Vivian's rally setup suddenly seemed to highlight the profound irony of someone attacking a decorated veteran in the name of patriotism and community safety. Mrs. Patricia Wells, who had strategically positioned herself to observe everything, nodded with obvious satisfaction. 25 years of HOA experience taught me to spot the real deal. She murmured to the neighbor standing next to her. That girl had warrior written all over her from day one. But the absolute best part, and I will never forget this image as long as I live, was Vivian still standing there, completely frozen like a blue screen of death, while the entire community applauded their war hero neighbor. Reality was crashing down around her like a controlled demolition. She had spent months harassing, investigating, and attempting to drive out of town a decorated Marine captain who had earned a Purple Heart serving our country. Every speech she gave about protecting the community, every dramatic accusation about hidden threats, every conspiracy theory she spun about dangerous government agents, all of it had been aimed at someone who had literally put her life on the line to protect people like Vivian. The crowd was still applauding when Vivian finally managed to close her mouth. But by then, it was far too late for any kind of graceful recovery. The damage was done. The truth was out. And everyone in the neighborhood now knew exactly who the real threat to community peace had been all along. And honestly, witnessing justice served with this level of poetic perfection is something I wouldn't trade for anything. After this shock, what consequences will Vivian face? Thanks for following this story on Echo Stories. Comment below and share your thoughts about this twist. The aftermath of that revelation completely reshaped everything in ways that would make a screenwriter weep with joy at the perfect irony. Vivian faced consequences that extended far beyond simple embarrassment. Federal harassment charges became a very real possibility. The community completely ostracized her, and her burgeoning real estate empire began crumbling faster than a house of cards in a hurricane. But here's the beautiful part. Despite possessing the ultimate upper hand and every right to be vindictive, Sophia maintained that same characteristic dignity that had defined her throughout this entire ordeal. When reporters started calling and neighbors requested interviews, she politely declined with a simple statement. I served my country. Now I just want to serve my family. Thank you for understanding. Vivian's complete unraveling was honestly difficult to watch, even for someone who had instigated all this chaos herself. The legal consequences accumulated. Rapidly, federal harassment, charges for targeting a service member, multiple counts of filing false police reports, and potential civil liability for defamation and stalking. The social exile was immediate and absolute. Neighbors who had been nodding along with her conspiracy theories yesterday were crossing the street to avoid her today. Her financial disaster unfolded in real time as real estate partners canceled contracts once word spread about the woman who had spent months attacking a decorated war hero. That blogger's live stream went locally viral, and now everyone knew exactly who Vivian Montgomery was and what she had done. But here's the twist that even Vivian couldn't have foreseen. The community transformation worked completely against her original goals. Property values actually increased after Sophia's hero status was revealed, because apparently, living next to a decorated Marine became a premium selling point rather than a liability. The woman who had attempted to eliminate what she perceived as a threat to her. Profit margins ended up creating the exact opposite result. Mrs. Patricia Wells delivered the final bureaucratic blow with characteristic efficiency. After thorough review, she announced at the next HOA meeting, the HOA suspends Miss Montgomery's membership pending investigation into harassment violations. and we formally apologized to Captain Martinez while inviting her to lead our new community safety initiative. Vivian's desperate attempts at damage control were utterly ineffective. Her half-hearted apologies were rejected immediately, and her efforts to explain that she was only trying to protect the community sounded increasingly hollow when everyone knew about her real estate speculation scheme. Moving trucks appeared outside her house within a week because apparently even Vivian realized that remaining in a neighborhood where everyone knew you as the woman who harassed a war hero wasn't exactly sustainable. The ironic reversal was complete when local media picked up the story with headlines like, "Marine Veteran Brings Honor to Emerald Lake Community," and property inquiries tripled while Vivian was forced to sell her investments at a significant loss. Mrs. Patricia later informed me that property values in our section increased by 12%. Within 2 months of the rally incident, living next to a decorated Marine captain became a legitimate selling point that realtors were actively advertising. Meanwhile, Vivian lost approximately $300,000 in potential profits when her investors pulled out. Her dream of flipping houses for premium prices died the moment that officer saluted my wife. The woman who tried to eliminate what she thought was a liability ended up creating the neighborhood's most valuable asset. Moving day was a masterclass in social consequences. Vivian loaded that truck in complete silence, with no neighbors offering assistance, no farewell gatherings, and no exchange of contact information for keeping in touch. The only sounds were boxes scraping against concrete and the occasional slam of a truck door. Mrs. Patricia watched from her window with the satisfaction of someone who had witnessed justice properly served after 25 years of dealing with HOA troublemakers. Some people, she observed to no one in particular, have to learn the hard way that actions have consequences. Meanwhile, life returned to normal for Sophia and me. Except now there was a fundamental shift in how our community related to my wife. She was back by the lake, cleaning her rifle with that same methodical precision she had always possessed. But the atmosphere had changed from suspicious observation to respectful distance. People understood now that they were observing someone who had earned the right to bear arms through service that most of them couldn't even imagine. When our young neighbor David approached us one evening, he was nervous but determined. "Excuse me, Captain," he said. "I'm David. I just moved in down the street. My teenage son heard about your service, and I was wondering, would you consider teaching him proper gun safety? I think it's important he learns from someone who really knows what they're doing." Sophia looked up from her rifle, maintenance with the first genuine smile I had seen from her throughout this entire ordeal. "Of course," she replied. "Safety education is an important responsibility. Bring him by Saturday morning." Word spread quickly through the neighborhood, and soon several families were requesting training for their children. Within a month, Sophia was teaching safety classes to over 20 families from our community and neighboring developments. Parents were driving from 3 towns over after hearing about the Marine captain who offered professional firearms education. She started with basic safety and storage protocols, but many participants requested advanced training in marksmanship and tactical awareness. The local police department officially endorsed her program and even sent their rookie officers to observe her teaching methods. What had begun as Vivian's attempt to brand Sophia as a dangerous neighbor had transformed her into the area's most respected firearms instructor and community safety advocate. The irony was so perfect it almost seemed scripted. Sophia reluctantly agreed to monthly safety workshops, transforming what Vivian saw as a threat into an actual community resource. Fear and suspicion were replaced by education and respect, which honestly felt like the way these things should function in a civilized society. Our final evening by the lake had a peaceful quality that we hadn't experienced since before. Hurricane Vivian blew into town. Sophia and I were watching the sunset with the American flag visible in the background. The same flag that had been hanging behind Vivian during her rally, now seemingly framing the true patriot in this story. "Think she learned her lesson?" I asked, mostly joking because honestly some people never learn. Sophia continued cleaning her rifle with practiced precision, each movement economical and purposeful. "Some people learn the hard way that quiet doesn't mean weak," she said thoughtfully. "Hopefully, others learn from watching. What happens when you judge people without knowing their story?" The local television station ran a follow-up segment titled, "From Harassment to Hero," How one woman's service united a community, featuring footage of Sophia teaching safety classes to neighborhood children and their parents. The B-roll shots showed kids learning respect for firearms, alongside respect for the people who have served our country, which felt like exactly the kind of education we need more of. Mrs. Patricia got the final word in the news segment, speaking with the authority of someone who had witnessed every kind of neighborhood drama imaginable. In my 25 years of HOA experience, she stated, I've learned one fundamental truth. Never judge a book by its cover, especially if that book served multiple combat tours defending your freedom to make that judgment in the first place. The closing image that remains with me is our community gathered for one of Sophia's safety demonstrations, neighbors united in learning, something valuable instead of divided by fear and speculation. There was Vivian's empty house in the background, with the sold sign where our former drama queen used to plot her next conspiracy theory. The contrast between what Vivian tried to create, division, fear, suspicion, and what actually resulted, education, respect, community cohesion, feels like a perfect example of how the universe sometimes delivers justice exactly right. My wife taught our neighborhood that real strength whispers while weakness shouts. And sometimes, it takes a decorated Marine to remind people what dangerous actually means. Sophia was never the threat. Ignorance, prejudice, and greed were the real dangers all along. Will anyone else dare to misjudge the quiet ones? Share in the comments those times you learned the lesson about never judging anyone by their appearance. This is Echo Stories, and the lesson here is unequivocally clear. Never underestimate the quiet ones. Sometimes the most formidable person in the room is the one making the least noise. If this story resonated with you, smash that like button. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my channel for more wild HOA stories and dramatic showdowns.